Welcome to APCUG's Wednesday workshop, where we get together in the middle of the week to learn more about technology. And being the third Wednesday of the month, that has been the tradition that this is when we get together and learn more about Linux. We have a number of good topics that I think that you'll enjoy and learn from today. I also want to remind the people who were here before to know that this year, a lot of the items on the agenda is going to come from you, the audience, and we're looking for people, and I'll have Judy send out an email separate from the follow-up to explain things and to ask some of you who are as smart or smarter than me in Linux to share some of your knowledge with us so we can learn more about Linux. I'm going to start things off today. And on the other computer here. Getting everything so it looks right. I'm running 3 computers today, so sorry for this.
I'm glad you're not a really old guy. Not that us older folks aren't capable of doing that.
Today's the Wednesday workshop for Learning Linux, the February 15, 2023. And we're going to be talking today in our section on software of the month, and that's one of our features that we have. And today we're going to be talking about sharing files, because we've had a number of people who want to be able to use both Linux and Windows, which is what we are trying to help people make the migration and have a Windows computer that they're using predominantly and a Linux computer that they are migrating to. But there are times when you need to be able to share files. And we now have a very, very simple, easy way to do it. I learned about this a couple weeks ago, and I said, okay, that's going on here. And this is to go both ways. We can send files from a Linux machine to a Windows machine, or a Windows machine to a Linux machine. I was going to try to do this live, but I drove myself crazy going back and forth between the 2 computers. And then I realized that it would just not take Zoom for a loop, having to stop sharing, go back to the other computer, share, stop sharing, go back to the other computer. So you'll see it just as well on here. The 2 programs we're going to be talking about today is Warpinator, which we may have mentioned a while ago. It's a program that was the brainchild of Linux Mint, but it's available for other distributions. And initially it was to communicate between Linux and Linux. And because there was a need for the sharing easily between the Windows and Linux computers, thanks to open source, I'll keep pushing that, we were able to modify the Warpinator program into a program for Windows called Winpinator. And I'll be careful because sometimes my N becomes an M sounding. So I'll try to be very carefully because this is Winpinator. Now getting Warpinator or Winpinator, because like I said, it comes standard with Mint. So if you're a Linux Mint user like I am and a few others, or a lot of others, it's already there. But if you're not a Mint, it has been created into a flat pack. And in a previous workshop, Cal did an excellent job of talking about these different kind of package managers. And Flatpak is really easy. You just install it. However, like with Ubuntu, Ubuntu has their own container program. So you can use it, but you would have to do a little bit of command line to build it because Ubuntu doesn't really want to use it. They want you to use their snap, but you can do it. And for Windows, it's just a download off of the website. And here is the Warpinator that all you do is go to FlatHub. As you can see up in the top corner, FlatHub is the warehouse of flat packs. Sometimes you might find it in your specific software store. Linux Mint has a section of flat packs right in their software thing that you can get, but it doesn't have everything. All of the flat packs are all here in FlatHub. And so you would just get it and install it. And it's a very easy install because it's a container. And so there's not a lot of installation things that you have to do. Winpinator is out there, and it's winpinator.swiss.cz, but you just do a search for Winpinator. And here's the website, very plain. You got two versions. You got a 32-bit version for anybody who's got a really old, I guess, Windows, because it goes back to working on Windows 7 with a little bit of a, like they said, a UCRT update. And the problem with that is you don't get notifications, and I'll talk about that. But normally you just download the 64-bit Winpinator, and then it's there to run when you need it. So first off, that there's some settings that you need to be aware of in both Warpinator and Winpinator. This is, and it's to kind of help things, the dark theme is the Linux side, light theme is the Windows side, so you can try to see which you go back and forth. Here are the general ones that you can show, and you can have the icon notification. You can have it start with the main window open. You can even have it set to start automatically if you do a lot of transfers between Linux and Linux or Linux and Windows. You can have it set to open automatically. If you're sharing large files, you might want compression taken care of to make it faster. By default, Warpinator and Winpinator will create a folder inside your documents, since normally it's documents that you're sharing back and forth, document type files. But if you wanted to, you could create a Warpinator folder outside of your documents and then just come here and direct it just like you'd normally do in lots of things we do in computers. Warpinator and Winpinator do require approval to be accepting the files that are being sent to you. Now, if you're in your own house like I am, and I'm sharing computers, I don't necessarily want to have to get up from one seat to go to the other one to accept the file. So I have mine requirement turned off because I'm just local. One good thing is that you want to make sure that you have it set so that if you're going to don't want to overwrite some files, that you'll do it. And you can have a notification displayed when somebody sends or tries to send you a file. Now you won't see those because those just pop up, and they pop up so fast and such that trying to do a screenshot and catch it, you can't. And if I was trying to go back and forth between the computers, sending from one, by the time we got switched over to the other computer, you're not going to see it anyway. But you can turn it on, turn it off, and it will pop up and say somebody's trying to send you a file. The second part on the connection, the group code is really just like a network name. And as we all know, when we get stuff, if there's a default name, which is Warpinator, everybody knows that in the world. So you want to come in and change, just like you do your Wi-Fi network, and change your code on all of your computers so that you're making your own little network. I just, for the example, used APCUG, and you do that on both. On the Linux one, you hit the button if you change the code to say set the code, and hit the button at the bottom to update the firewall rules, because this is all a part of incoming, outgoing messages, and then it will work. Now switching to the Windows version, Winpinator, it pretty much has the same stuff. There's your general information. You can do a language, start with the main win open and automatically. Compression if you need to. Same thing. Notice that it's set up the Winpinator folder inside of documents. That's not a have to if you want it separate. And again, requiring approval before accepting files or overwritten. Preserves zone information in incoming files. I'm not quite sure. That must be with the timestamp, I'm guessing. And then if you go over to the connection, the same thing. Make sure that all of your computers are using the same group code. And notice though that there's nothing on here about okaying for the firewall. If you want to change your port numbers and you know what you're doing, you can go ahead, but that's something you better know more about the networking. All right, so now let's talk about connecting. And when you fire up the computer, it's trying to connect at the same time you go to settings. So I showed you the settings first, so it wouldn't be kind of confusing. In Windows, what happens is in Linux, Windows goes and searches your network and finds any other Warpinator or Winpinator program running on your network. Now, I've got numbers listed because you can be connected to a number of different computers. I have 2 Windows computers that I use. One belongs to APCG, one's mine, and I have my 2 or 3 Linux computers. So if they were all up and running with Warpinator, Winpinator, you would have a whole list that I could be able to send files to. And it does show you your IP address for the one you're connecting to and to yours. And so you just click on whichever one in that list that you want to connect to. In the Windows version, very similar. I guess Windows likes to have really cute looking GUI. So this one looks a little bit nicer than that, but my concern is functionality. If it works, I don't care how cute it looks. But the same thing. The only difference here is that you click on the one you want, then you have to hit next. In Linux, it assumes that if you click on that, that's the one you want to talk to. And that's how easy you connect to. So let's look at sending from Linux to Windows first, and then we'll do the opposite that Bill James would want to know too. Oh, how do we do from Windows to Linux? So we've clicked on the one we want to talk to. You can tell that that's my Windows Tower computer, and on the side with the button to send. And this is just a sending program to one side or the other. When you click on the send, you have two choices: recent files that you might want to pick from, or browse. And I'm not going to show you this next part because everybody knows it. It's just your standard file manager. When you click browse, go find the files that you want to. You can do one or multiple ones. And you can send folders too. So once we select the one we want, it will show up on the screen, and you can see in the circle that this is files. These two files I've selected are going uploading to my Zoom Wind Tower. And notice that it's waiting for approval. And I wanted you to see that, to know that if you have it turned on for having to accept, it's going to sit here and say, I'm waiting for approval. Now, if we go over to the Windows side, a pop-up comes, and if you have notifications on, you'd see a pop-up first. And then you come here and it said, John is trying to send you files, and you can accept or decline. If I have the feature turned off for requiring it, it would just automatically go. And so I hit the accept button, and very fast, because you're on your own internal network, it just, zooms right across and tells you that the transfer is completed at the certain time, how many files, how big it was, all that good information. If we go back to the Linux side, our screen, our little item has changed from waiting for approval that it has been completed. And it was you transferred 15.2 megabytes. That's that simple. And back on the Windows side, going to that folder under Documents and Winpinator, there are the two files that were sent over, and now I can move them to wherever I want or do whatever I want to them. That simple. Now let's do the reverse, which is going to be basically the exact same steps, but only the look is different. So back on the Windows side, we had already clicked, and you can see up at the top, it says we're going to John's Linux laptop on this network. And I have two choices in Windows. I can either send files or I can send folder. On the Linux side, I can browse and select a folder. I don't have to choose between the two. It doesn't matter, because if I wanted to send a folder in Windows, after I hit send files, I've got to back out and go hit the folder button. So again, it's just the standard Windows File Explorer. So we don't need to look at that. You know how to use that. Select the files that you want. And then again, you get the information that says we're in progress. We're sending 3 elements. So this was 3 files I sent this time. And you can see again, it says waiting for approval. Normally, it's your choice. At home, I'm turning that off so I don't have to get up and go back and forth. Kind of defeats the purpose of that. And one of the really good advantages of this is, over thumb drives, is you don't have to take out thumb drive, carry it over, because it's so fast. When you try this, that little bar that goes across is just going to zoom right over. So if we go back to the Linux one, you can see this time the arrow says these files are coming down and waiting for your approval. And it says files may be overwritten. And this will always pop up if you happen to have files. Now, I think it's because I did this a second time to get a better screenshot of what I wanted to do. And then a check mark and accept this request. Again, your choice whether you have to accept it. And on my side of the screen, it says the files have been completed. I have a delete. I can remove them. I can click on the folder and go directly to the folder that's the Warpinator folder. Back on the Windows machine, again, as before, it confirms that it's been completed. But you can always tell what you've been doing with these files, because they got the arrows that tell you, just like we do upload, download, and we've got it. If I go back and click on that folder on my Linux, it takes me to the Warpinator folder inside of Documents, and there's the files that I sent. And again, now I can do anything I want with those files. Now, last thing we got to do is exit and quit. And there's two different things. When you quit with Warpinator, it actually can stay active in your taskbar area. So you're really just kind of closing this out. You can go to the Warpinator and change it over that way. In Windows, you have two choices. You can exit the program and keep it running, or you can exit and stop the service. And that's your choice. You know, if you're going to be changing some files a little bit later, then you can do that. All right. Pop-up just came. Like I said, don't do it because it pops up on my screen. But a comment was made that this works for Android too, but we're talking computer to computer, and they're trying to work on it for iOS too. Right now, there's not a Mac version that I could see in the discussions about that. And that's how easy it is. It's a simple download and a few simple spots. So if you have a computer that's one's Linux, one's Windows, then here you go, and you can get that and transfer so easily. And it doesn't have to be just a text file. I have used it to transfer ISO files, graphic files, any kind of file you can transfer. Judy, was there any specific questions about that before I go on to our next section?
Yes.
Okay.
And I answered one of them. Warpinator for Mac is in beta.
And that means it doesn't guarantee, don't put your life on it. Thanks.
So I answered that one. Normally, sending files from Linux to another device is quite slow compared to Windows. So does Warpinator have really fast transfers?
Oh yeah, that's why I said I couldn't do screenshots, because before we could even switch to the other computer, the bar would have already been across.
Okay.
So it's, you know, and it's really it's as fast as how your network at home works.
John is showing Winpinator to transfer files from one computer to another, but can't you use it on a Windows computer to create the Linux file on the same Windows computer and then email the file to a Linux user?
Do that one again. Warpinator will not go from Windows to Windows. Okay. Because the Warpinator program to convert to Windows had to have a bridge with how Linux works. Can't
you use Warpinator on a Windows computer to create the Linux file on the same Windows computer and then email the file to a Linux user?
Warpinator has nothing to do with creating files. It is to transfer files. And Warpinator does not work on Windows. You have to have Winpinator. And you can create files on your Windows computer and email them, but this is so much faster. I don't know why you'd want to take the extra step to create something, email it out, go back to the other computer, receive it. Just use Warpinator on your Linux computer and Winpinator on your Windows computer. But again, Winpinator will not communicate with another Windows machine, only with Linux. Linux to Linux on Warpinator, Linux to Winpinator on a Windows, but Windows to Windows, you guys, you know, you have your own stuff, and we're not going to talk about that. Bill James can talk about that on another workshop date. Anything else?
I've got a comment.
Yep.
Send-anywhere.com works on Linux, Mac, Windows, iOS, and Android.
That's good, but you got to go out to the internet and back.
Do you know what the file transfer protocol is? SMB, etc.
I'm not a tech. I'm not an engineer and a coder. I don't care what it is.
Just
when I see how well it works, but there could be some SMB in there. There could be other codes, but who cares?
Okay.
If it works, it works.
Okay, last question. Why not just use Samba, S-A-M-B-A?
It's a messy Windows program.
Okay.
This was much easier. You don't have to go, into anything else. Just share your file. It's like putting it on just a simple file Explorer transfer.
Okay, this is really the last question.
Okay.
Windows has work group sharing and Linux apps supports Windows networking. Why not use that?
I don't use Windows. I don't like Windows stuff. I'll just be upfront.
Oh, I got that from your last answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Carry on.
This is just somebody, somebody had a question about, how do we transfer files easily? Yeah, you can set up Samba and go through the networking and Orv might want to comment about that later, but hey, I like to keep things simple, and that was just too simple and too easy to go.
And if somebody that uses that, they might want to demo it to show the difference.
Exactly.
My email address is jtallor@apcug.org.
Very good. Okay. Moving on to our next section, we have a section that we call Question of the Month. And we have a section we call News of the Month, but the only one thing that I didn't want to share with it because I didn't like that news article. But anyway, so this was one of the ones that came in as people who were here before. We said if you would like to have something shown or answered or something on the workshop, send it to us by the first Wednesday of the month, which gives us 2 weeks to get a presentation planned. And so this is one question that did come through, so we're going to respond to it. We have talked in our fall big series of workshops about thumb drives and about creating a live thumb drive for you to test out Linux. And then, of course, we went the next step and said, as Cal taught us, the better route is just get an old computer that somebody doesn't want to use anymore because it won't run Windows right, and put Linux on that so you can run your Windows and you can run your Linux. But some people will also say, I would like to use the Linux because I can take it with me and I can take it to somebody else's house, plug it into their computer, and I can be running Linux. But I can't have any files that I've stored on it go with me, or any settings changes go with me. So is there a way that we can do this? And we call this presentation today Live USB with a Brain, because it remembers things. Oh, this mouse. Now, for our workshop last year, when we were doing this, I was focusing on the program called Etcher. And as it says right here, for ease of use, Etcher was the easiest program that we can use to create these live thumb drives, because it's 1, 2, 3. 1, select the ISO file. 2, select your USB thumb drive that you're going to use. And 3, hit it. And that's all it takes to make that. There are other programs out there that will create that, but we wanted the ones that was the easiest to use. And so we talked about Etcher. Now, the problem is that what we want is persistent or persistence. We want things to be remembered. Etcher doesn't offer that feature. It's just simply a very good, quick and easy live USB maker. Another one of the live makers is UNetbootin. It's good, but it also doesn't offer this feature. Today, I'm going to show you two programs that do offer the feature, and they're just as good. And again, the only reason we didn't use those was because Etcher was so easy. Nope, that's the wrong mouse. Now in Linux, if we were talking Linux and we're not today, I'd be probably talking about a program called MKUSB, Make a USB. In Mint, it would require adding a PPA, and we're not going to talk about PPAs today. That will be another workshop. PPAs are something that's really used by Ubuntu. And so there needs to be a whole lesson to talk about that because you would have to do some command line codes to add something, but that's another workshop. Again, we're focusing on from last fall's series, learning Linux from the Windows user standpoint. So we're going to focus on the programs that run on Windows to accomplish what this person wants to have with persistence. Sorry, wrong program. Again, that's the wrong screen. All right, so the first program I'm going to talk about is called Yummy from Pendrive Linux. And Pendrive Linux has been around for a while, has a good program to make these. However, I will have to admit, and maybe this is where I got, or we got some feedback from people who created or tried to create the thumb drives, and they wouldn't work. I used their regular program and made a thumb drive, and I could not get it to boot. I tried making it a couple different choices with the settings. I could not make it boot. Now, the program I was using is their older program, and it's just designed to make it. Their new program that they're really pushing is called Yummy or Yummy. And this one, and for John M out there, we're going to take a look at, because this one will make a multi-boot thumb drive, similar to the way Ventoy works. And we'll save that maybe for another workshop. So this one works fine. So we're going to talk about the Pendrive Linux with the version, the newest one called Yummy, and it has a couple of different versions you got to look for. It can have a version that's going to strictly work with MBR and old BIOS stuff, and this one, as you can see, works with BIOS and UEFI. So this is kind of like the better one. All right, so you get this one, and this is very similar to what we did with Etcher, only in the different order. First thing we do is select your drive. Second, you get your distro. Third thing, then you get your ISO. The second one is telling what distro you're using, and then you hit the create button. And so basically that's the same thing we do. Only with the Pendrive Live, it can add the persistence. So you can see here that I have selected a thumb drive. This is an after the fact, when I've already made the multi-boot one. I had to come back and said, oh, I need some new screenshots. So normally this would probably not be a multi-boot that I have. You have the option to wipe it and reformat it. You can either reformat it FAT32 files to work with anything, or NTSF. Good. Then what you do, and this is what's kind of neat about pen drive Linux, is you drop their list and you pick what you want. And you can see out the bottom, I picked the Linux Mint. It's highlighted in blue. And then once you pick that, they give you an opportunity to go and download that ISO. And you can see here that it says, click this box and visit the Linux Mint homepage. And what it will do is it'll just open up your browser, go right to the download page, and you can download it. If you already have the ISO, you can skip the check mark and just go to step 3, which says use your browse and your file manager and tell me where that ISO is. So that's pretty much the same as what we did with Etcher or probably UNetbooten. But what happens is the next step, once you pick the ISO and pen drive says, hey, that's a Linux version, don't go backwards. It adds a step 4. And the step 4 is you can add a persistent file for storing. And you can make it somewhere up to what you want. What I found out was that on pen drive Linux, the maximum it would go up to would be a 4 GB partition for storing. And then you hit the create one. So the only difference is with Pen Drive Live, once it knows you've got a Linux distro that you're going to be burning, it'll open up the step 4 so that you can add persistence. And then you hit create. Simple enough. Also, a warning will pop up and say, are you sure? In fact, sometimes it'll even be a second. Are you really, really sure? Because this is going to wipe everything. And so if you're sure that this is where you're going to go, got the right thumb drive and all set up right, then you hit yes. And it'll take a while. It's not a fast process because it's got to do 2 different things. You know, it's got to do the main operating system and then it's got to do the persistent folder. And it's created. And now you can just do what we did before, go to another computer, boot to that thumb drive, and then when you run that thumb drive, you will be able to make changes that will stay with it. Now let's take a look at the other program that we have talked about before, and we like it. It's called Rufus. The only difference with Rufus is it's got too much options, I think. So somebody who's new to this, there's too much on there. But you can hide the advanced format down here and not see that you're going to do a quick format. You're going to do an extended label, an icon, or you can check it for bad things. So you can hide that. And you can hide advanced drive properties, which I didn't even use. In fact, this list USB hard drives, a warning comes up and says, if you do this, you're at your own risk, because that will be possibly showing hard drives that you don't want to take a chance on mixing it. So I wanted you to see everything, but normally the hide advanced properties closes that up and the hide advanced format is closed up. So really we're down to, again, first choice, where's your thumb drive? Okay, it found my 16 gig thumb drive. And then I'm going to have to say I'm going to use an ISO image, and then I'm going to have to select it. There are a couple changes here you can make, but you really don't want to, because you want to be able to run this on a BIOS or a UEFI machine. So our next screen, once we go through here and you select, and select means go browse for your ISO for Linux. there is an option for another choice, and I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to definitely try, because it will download a Windows 11, 10, or something else, which I thought was interesting, that you can do that, make it into a bootable thumb drive. But that's for a different workshop, because that's not Linux. And again, here's your persistence. And right now it's set for nothing, and you can drag it. Now notice I have already made it larger than I can on the pen drive Linux. It stopped me at 4, even though I had a 16 gig. And this one, I think when I went all the way to the edge, could have gone all the way to maybe 12, 10 or 12. But you know, you're using this as a portable operating system. You don't need a huge. And I didn't have to do anything else to this. They labeled it Linux Mint. I could have changed that. And then all you have to do is hit the start. And again, if you hit the start, you get a warning. All data on the device will be destroyed. And so you can go okay or not, and boom, it's created. And again, then you just go out, plug it in, boot it up. The big difference is from what we did with Etcher is that this one now has persistence, which means it's going to remember setting changes and whatever. I thought I'd just show you that if you put that thumb drive into your Windows and go to the good old disk management, you'll see that it actually was created with 2 partitions, an 8 gig 0.96 for the operating system, and then a 6 gig persistent side. And of course, these programs have to do something because it's compressed special to be able to fit on 9 gigs when normally we need 10 to 20 gigs to do a home. So that's what it looks like. And it can be readable because it's set up on a FAT32, so Windows will see it. If it was an ext4, you might have a little bit of a problem. Now, your end results of that change, you're just going to have to trust me, because there's no way that I can show you on a live thumb drive, because you can't see what it's doing, because you have to be able to share that screen. You can't. But you got to believe me. Here it is. This is the thumb drive, and it's identical to both, whether I did it with the pen drive Linux or this one. It did the same thing. If you look, you can see that there's a different background. That's not the default background that normally comes with a live USB. I was able to go in, change it, and it remembered it. If you look up in the file manager, you see I created a folder called APCUG. And as you see, that came back. If on a regular thumb drive, I could create it, but then when we come back the next time, it won't be there. I even went into my documents folder, created a empty file, which Linux does is pretty neat. And when I came back, that file was there the second time. So there you go. It works, but you just have to use the right tool to add that persistence. And I'll stop the sharing, and that way.
Have questions?
Yep, that's what we're going to go to.
What format of USB flash drive?
It was a FAT32.
That's what I thought. You just answered that a moment ago.
Yep. And it's that way because it's got to be able to be read by BIOS for, you know, older computer, EFI for newer computers. But with the pen drive, the new UMI, they have 3 different programs, and you can download all 3 of them, of course, but one will make a thumb drive that only works with the old BIOS system, not UEIF, and then one works with both. And then getting into the newest stuff, they create one that works with the exFAT file system. And I said, I don't know enough about that. I'm going to be sticking with what I know best. And it worked. It worked. First times it didn't. The first couple of times I could not. I don't know why it wouldn't boot, but that needs to be somebody else to know what didn't go right.
Were you using the portable version of Rufus?
No.
No.
It's on my computer. Well, in a sense it is, because it's an exe file. It doesn't get installed. It just runs.
All righty. Some of the features that work in Windows 10 do not work in 11. Just an FYI comment.
Oh, okay.
So
That's a Bob James comment.
Bill James. No, that's actually Tim from Chicago.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are my two questions for that. Carry on.
Well, great. Okay. So there's two of our sections that we have when we do our workshops, and both sections are open to anybody out there who would like to share a software and do what I did and share something one of the next meetings, or if you have something you would like to see. We kind of, our team is kind of going, what else is there? What do we want? We use Linux. What do people want to see? So submit those. You can either send them to Judy or to me, Jay Kennedy at APCUG. I also think I said on the handout you could do it to FreeJohn at protonmail.com. But give us some ideas of what you want, and or if you have something that you'd like to share and say, hey, just like Judy said, somebody brought up something that they might do that at a future one. I probably won't. Maybe you can do that for us.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so send those stuff in. You're a part of this group. As I said, I can look around the rooms in the list and I see people who know more about Linux than I do, and you're sitting on that side. You should be sitting on this side. I'll be in touch. All right, another one of our features that we'll be doing throughout the year is what we call the what did I call that? Desktop DE discovery, desktop environment discovery. And what we're going to focus on, just to show you the difference, is we have at least 12 or more desktop environments. Ubuntu has adopted at least 9 of those. And so to keep our factors or our variables, that's the word I want, old school days, same, we're going to be using the Ubuntu distro and take a look at different versions of Ubuntu with different desktops. And this month, Cal is going to take us through the Gnome desktop with Ubuntu. And then next month, we already have it set that Orv is going to be taking us through the KDE desktop on Ubuntu. And then in the letter that I'm sending out through Judy, we'll say, hey, if you are using a favorite desktop environment different than Gnome or different than KDE, because we got that covered, how about you sharing that with us? I even have a form that says, talk about this. So it makes it very easy that we're all going to talk about the same thing. So without that, I'm going to turn things over to Cal, and he's going to take us into a desktop.
Okay. So today I'm going to talk about the Gnome desktop as it appears in Ubuntu. Now, it just so happens if you go to phosphorus.com, which is an internet magazine. This month they started a series on the desktop environment, and a couple of days ago the article was a beginner's guide to learning your way around GNOME desktop environment. So if you don't like what I say today, here's another resource. And a couple of weeks earlier, they had kind of compared a few different desktops, a beginner's guide to Linux desktops. So that would be a quick way to start. It's just a magazine you can browse through and find those articles. I'll talk about a little background. We talk about a distribution, a Linux distribution. And what a distribution is, it's a thing. It's an installable image, which has as a minimum of an operating system. And it comes from somebody. And that somebody will add a whole bunch of extra software based on their vision. And when you get it, you can then add or delete component software for it. A desktop environment, actually a desktop is the actual interface that you use with a touch screen or a keyboard or your mouse. And it generally contains a coordinated set of tools for basic tasks. And this set of tools is called the environment. So each desktop may have a set that they've selected, and that's the desktop environment, or DE. And in Linux, we have multiple desktop environments, and they basically sit on top of the operating system. And the developer can decide which desktop they want. A common way to do this, because different people want different things, is that they will offer different versions which have the same operating system, and they will put a different desktop for one version and make an image for that. They'll take another desktop and make another image for that, etc. That makes it easy on the user, and that's a typical way to do it, although you can add your own desktop if you're expert and so forth. Now, my particular Linux history, I've used computers for a while, but when I joined the computer club, I got into Linux, and for 9 years I used Ubuntu. And then I switched to Linux Mint because I found it was easier for new users if I gave workshops on Linux. But I still kept an Ubuntu installed, which means I had a working system either on another drive or another computer or dual boot. And so I've kind of kept up with Ubuntu, although I do use Linux Mint as my basic daily driver. So Ubuntu is from a company, a British company called Canonical. And that company was started in 2004 by an entrepreneur who had made his money on the internet, and he gave $10 million startup capital. And his goal was to have an open source Debian-based distro, which would be easy and user-friendly. Up to that time, you had to know a little bit more about the computer basics to make Linux really work. And the main issues that I think they addressed successfully was getting the hardware to be used by Linux, because the hardware was really designed to work with Windows because of the business side. And they kind of came out with what I call the auto detect and auto install, which means that when you plug the distro in, it goes and sees what you have in your computer and puts something in there to make it work automatically without you having to do anything else. This was very popular. It increased the users ordinary folks, and it became the face of Linux for a while. And it was a popular base. Other distros kind of built on top of it and used the hardware solutions that Ubuntu had come up with. Now, over the years, they've searched for ways to make money. I think they've been successful, but they've not been an Amazon or a Google. And they keep making promises that they're going to go from a private company to a public company, but that has not physically happened yet. So the Ubuntu started out with the desktop called Gnome. In fact, Gnome 2 was the version. And pretty much it looks, here's an early version. It had kind of the Windows 7, Windows XP look, drop-down menus. And at that time, Windows used to put the panel, the control panel on the bottom, and Mac used to put the control panel on the top. So they just put both places. So this went along for a long time. And then in 2011, after the appearance of smartphones and tablets, Gnome decided that they would make an interface that looked more like a smartphone. Since Ubuntu was trying to launch its own smartphone operating system, it had a slight version of Gnome 3, as it was called at the time, and called it Unity. So here is a kind of a vision of what the desktop looked like when they went to that more of the phone version. And now they're kind of at Gnome 4, I would call it, but they've started renaming it. Instead of 4, 4.1, 4.2, they've gone the whole numbers, and now it's 40, 41, 42, etc. Now, Ubuntu is a good base, but it also offers, like I said before, various variations where they put in extra specific software. As an example of this, and John was mentioning it, the Ubuntu base, if you have GNOME, when you get Ubuntu, but if you want the KDE Plasma desktop, they have a version and they have a special name. They love special names, and they call it Kubuntu. And if you want an LXQt desktop, then they have Lubuntu, and they have several others. And I don't know if this is a complete list, but it's the major ones. So all of these flavors, as they called, use the same repository, which means they use the same physical resources. A lot of these are made by kind of independent people, but they make an agreement with Canonical. And so that they're all in step and they all release at the same time, and they get a lot of help from Canonical. Today, I'm going to show you the operating system with Ubuntu 22.10. The nomenclature is pretty simple. The first number is the year, 2022, and the second number is the month that it was released, October. And it is an x86 version, 64-bit. So in a few months, a couple months, it'll go to 20. They do this every 6 months. We'll have 2304, and I'll have to switch to that. Now, they are longer term support versions, which I won't talk about. They all Linux distros have a Linux kernel. That's what makes them Linux. In Ubuntu, they use the Debian package, dpackage, and they also have their own container software that they push called Snap. An alternative would be Flatpak for another distribution. The desktop interface, if you want to use text and just use the keyboard, is Bash. And I'm sure Orv will talk about this or some other shell, text shell. The graphical desktop is GNOME, and this particular version is GNOME 43. They all have certain things they add, a window manager theme. I won't get into that. It's just some things you can change, and it's kind of the under the hood details. So here is a screenshot. I'll show you a couple of screenshots and then we'll go to a live view. This is a classic desktop. This is the workspace, and I have two applications open. This is called a floating workspace. You can put one in front of the other. You can make them in the whole screen or not. You can minimize it, just everything like you do in Windows. The thing I want you to notice is all Gnome desktops will have this top panel. The main panel will have, I'll talk about this in a minute, it'll have the date and some notifications in the middle, and then it'll have system controls over here. The second panel, which they now call a dock, this is where you would have your favorites and also what applications are currently running. Two things to note, this is the launch applications. This is the start button, if you will. If you come from Windows, this is how you start your application. Pick which application you want to start. And then there's activities, which will have access to workspaces, which we'll talk about. And activities is a little bit different in KDE. It's a little more restricted in Gnome. But it will show you that. So if you select the launcher, what you will see is you do not get a drop-down menu. You get all of the programs you want to start right here, just like your phone. And just like your phone, you can move them around. They can have multiple pages. You can put them into groups, just like your phone. Up here are the workspaces, which is a concept that Gnome kind of started. I've always used it using Gnome in things like KDE or Windows. Sometimes these workspaces, if you have them and they are possible, will be in the main panel. But here is another way to control them. When you go to these activities, it will show the workspaces. Here I have 3 different workspaces. And so you can the idea is you can put an application in each window, and you can move window to window rather than using the little tabs on the control bar. Kind of a matter of choice. Gnome is kind of built so that it works pretty easy. KDE is a little bit different. So Gnome almost forces you to use this. So what you can do is now you can scroll left or right to see the different workspaces, and you can take an application that's in one space and you can move it to another, and you can move them around and arrange them. So that's kind of the end of that part of the demo. So here you see an actual live screen. And notice I have some bars up here that I can't get rid of with this particular system for some reason. So one thing we always do with a desktop is we want to change some settings. So if I go up here to the systems area and click on it, it'll give me a bunch of choices. I can change the volume. This is how I shut the machine down. But I can also go to settings. There's 3 or 4 ways to get the settings. But here are settings. And this is pretty classic settings, like Windows or any computer you've ever had has settings. And if we go to, we can go down and say about, and it could actually tell me that I'm using which Ubuntu I'm using. But if I want to go back up, one of the things that we do with settings a lot is appearance. So appearance, because different people like different colors and ways that the desktop appears. So the default is what's called a light theme. If you click over here, this is a dark theme. So a dark theme is white print on a dark screen, and regular is dark print on a light screen. This is good if you do your computing in a dark room at night and so forth. I'll turn it back to the normal, and you get an accent color. This makes it a little bit different, so if I turn it to blue, if you look here at this folder, you can see it turned to blue. If I turn it here to an orange, you can see a red, it changed this color, and it changes the little accent, little fine touch. But your background, your screen background, there's a bunch of pictures you get, or you can add your own picture. So here I'll add my picture, and you can see here's the bridge at Baton Rouge. You can also take one of their pictures and add it to a background, or you can take here's the standard one that they come with, which is their mascot for this particular distribution, which I think is a kudu. Again, they have plenty of names for everything. If you go, Ubuntu pretty much stays with GNOME, but it adds a few little things that it's found the people in Ubuntu like. And it's kind of consolidated that in the last couple of distros to the Ubuntu desktop. So the Ubuntu desktop have icons. So here's an icon down at the bottom, and I can make it small. And that's my personal folder, that's my home folder. Or I can make it disappear, which I normally do. The next section is the dock. So here at the dock, this is how you launch programs. And you can see that it puts settings in there, and it's got a little dot indicating that settings is open. Normally, if I move the screen, the dock will always stay. If I hide it, the dock will hide, and I'd have to come back and get it. So I'm going to leave it on. You notice that this kind of is centered. This is kind of the new theme, and Mac started it, and now Windows 11 has it, and so forth. If you don't like it, you can make it cover the entire edge, and I'll leave it like that. And that, if the next thing I do is the position on the screen, I can move it to the right, or I can move it to the bottom. So I'll leave it at the bottom, because now that looks like a Windows machine. Got it. So that you can have that look. We go down a little bit, and it's got something called configure dock behavior. And on that, you can have it. I have a couple other disk drives hooked to this machine. If I wanted to see them, mounted drives, I could put it there. And also, if I want to show the trash folder, I can put it there, but it's also available in the file manager. So I think that's a waste of space, but you can turn it on or off as you wish. So let me get out of this, and I'll come over here and start the file manager. So here's the file manager. And the file manager is just like your phone. It's kind of any way you want, and you can move things around. You want things over here, or, you know, any way you want it. Now, so what I've done is I arranged some things I'm using a lot, Zoom, the settings, and all my LibreOffice, and so forth. And it has a second page. And you can add a third or fourth page. It's just like your phone. And you can have these, you can group objects together. So if I click on this, I can have two applications together. And I could add another one. Let's say I wanted to add this to, and this enables you to group things. Here, for instance, utilities is the one they give you to start with. A little too quick. So utilities, and there's, you know, if you want all your utilities together, and you can rename the folder, and pretty common, just like your cell phone. So now, if I get out of this and I go to activities, let me see. Let me start a couple programs. I'll put settings, and maybe I'll put calculator. So if I go to activities, all this does, it says I have two windows I could put things, and now I can move this over to the other window, and I can change my windows back and forth. I can use smart keys, or I can use the activities to switch back and forth up here. That's how I can manage and then put those on. Of course, the apps can be full screen or minimized. And when they're minimized, notice they all show up. I can start that when it goes to the correct desktop. So it's just like your Windows Mac type operation. You just have workspaces as an additional feature. There's a couple programs. If we go to things we normally do, let's say we want to write text. We have a text editor, and the text editor, it has remembered a couple files I have. This used to be called gedit, but all it does is text. It's not very fancy. What it's really for is for people that write programs. Okay, so here's some C programming type layout. And there are other text editors for programs that are a lot better than this, but this is one that comes with it. However, if you're a normal person and you want a text editor, it has the LibreOffice suite. So it will open, and this is LibreOffice, you know, and you can do everything you can do like Microsoft Word. So that is the suite for and this presentation I did previously was done in Impress, which is another LibreOffice program. You can have at the bottom here in my favorites, I've already got Firefox. Firefox is the default that comes up. And remember, you can always in Firefox, in any browser, go and move your bookmarks from one to the other. You can save your bookmarks in the file, and then you can bring them over and load them. And you can also put Edge and Chromium, Brave, if you wish. Here is the file manager. Looks like probably any file manager you've ever seen. And if you go to pictures, I have a bunch of pictures. There's a default picture reader, so it will just open your pictures and you can scroll through them. This is just like Windows. And just like Windows, this has no editing power to speak of. If you would like editing power, a better choice, I don't know if it comes installed or not. Not you can easily, yeah, I think it comes installed. This is Shotwell, which is a pretty good editor. And you can look at, it'll show you can find things by date, what date did I take this picture. And if you click on a particular picture, it has a bunch of things you can do, and one of them, and you can edit, for instance, if you want to edit the brightness or the color and the tone and crop it and the various typical things. So it's a pretty lightweight but effective editor. And of course, you can get GIMP if you want a more comprehensive bitmap editor. For videos, if I go back, I don't know how well this is going to work over Zoom, but if I go to videos, I have a video here. If I double click on it,
I'm excited to see some development in System 76's
start up.
Rust version of the Cosmic Desktop. That's right, more on Cosmic Desktop environment to kick off.
And you can view it. It's just it will just work for music. It uses actually the same program, and you just double click.
This is Floss Weekly. I'm Doc Searles,
and the thing will start working. So it's kind of set up. There's music programs and photo and video editors, which is another long story. But so how do you get all these programs? Comes with the software store or the software center. And it has, of course, the ones they push. And then you can, out of the various categories, and you just click on one and hit install, and it'll install it. And if you want to get rid of it, you click on that, it'll have remove, and you can remove it. And finally, so that to lead into Orv here, of course, it has a terminal. And there it is. And you can use command line interface. And like I said, it's a bash, it's the bash script. So basically, that's my presentation.
Orv, that was excellent, and I really appreciate the intro that you did and well organized, which will make it easy now that we can just each month that somebody does one, pick up like on about your fourth slide where it says today I'm doing, and everybody can see how easy this isn't a big rocket scientist thing to share. Judy, do we have any questions for or Cal about Gnome?
I have a question. As usual, he's so thorough. What can I say? Is there more processing overhead to use one app per workspace rather than have all open apps on one workspace?
Not really.
Good to know.
I think it's just your workflow. You know, do
Yeah,
you like things
it's a
cluttered?
it's a personal choice. Minuscule. If there's any difference, it's just super minuscule.
Yeah. On my computer, I have three workstations going. One was the Zoom part, one was my first presentation, one was my second. So I had them up all ready to go and just switch back and forth.
Because it takes more resources to run 3 programs versus 1, but it makes no difference whether you use a workspace or not for the 3 programs.
No, that was excellent. That was a great start. And I think this will be an exciting section because each time we do this, we can take another desktop and just show what somebody has said. I think Gnome was a good desktop, but I think if we allow it to do this, it's going to make it a better one. And that's what everybody says in open source. Free open source, you can make whatever changes and designs you want. And so next month, we'll see what KDE, which is the oldest one, did, and then we'll go on from there, depending on who we can get to share. Now we're coming to my favorite part of our new series of workshops, and this is Taming the Terminal. And I'm not going to say anything more about it because I don't want to take anything from him, but the one thing I'll say is this is the feature of Linux that makes it so special. Outside of this, everything is the same. It's a computer operating system, programs, mouse, this and that. But what Orv is going to do is help you become the, I don't want to say power user, that scares people off, but being able to access what really it's a feature of the power of Linux, I guess. So Orv, help us tame the terminal.
I will attempt. Let's see here. Okay, get a couple things out of the way here. Okay, we're going to talk about taming the terminal, and it's not as scary as it sounds. Back in the old days, when computers were big, mainframes, and later mini computers, you needed a way for multiple users to use it, and they used the actual physical terminal. This is an ADM3A, very common back then, and there were hundreds of different ones. Back then, 80 characters wide and 25 lines. In fact, the early ones were only capital letters. Lowercase came later, and then some very basic graphics. These were connected to the real computer, the mini computer, with a serial cable, your RS-232. Distance limit for RS-232, the standard limit is 25 feet, and obviously that's not very, if you need people scattered all over a large building, that doesn't work very well. So serial port extenders, little boxes, became very popular very quickly, and a company I work for sold literally millions of them. When GUIs came on the scene, excuse me, you still needed command line access because they were a little limited, and as we'll show later, command line could be very powerful. In Linux, it's provided via what they call a terminal emulator program. And different distros provide different terminal emulators. GNOME is the GNOME terminal, and KDE Plasma uses console. And there's lots of others. But the console only starts up a shell program. And the shell program provides access to the command line. It takes what you type and interprets it, passes it along to the computer. And over the course of Unix and Linux development, there have probably 2 or 3 dozen types of shells, all with different features. One of the first shells was called the Bourne shell, and it was written by a guy named Bourne, and it was just SH. The latest and most popular iteration is the Born Again shell called Bash, the Born Again shell. It's the most popular shell program in Linux now. It's the default for almost everything, almost every distro. Well, we'll talk about the different flavors of shell later. So here's Ubuntu, and Calvin showed this, and this is Bash running in Gnome terminal, running on Gnome. And here's KDE Plasma. In the last couple of years, they've added a feature. You can split the terminal horizontally or vertically or both. I don't use it too much. I tend to open multiple windows if I need, multiple terminals if I need to use it. But you can certainly do this and start a process in one window and watch the output in another. How do you start it? In Ubuntu, this is the icon, and you can see the prompt there. In KDE Plasma, it's pretty much the same thing. Pretty much all of the Ubuntus provide default shells that you can access. You can see Bash in there. You can see SH, the original shell. Dash, which is supposedly better than Bash, but it hasn't been adopted very well. And I had to look up and see what RBash was. It's called restricted bash in a multi-user computer. If you want to severely limit the command line commands you can issue to the computer, you give that user the RBash shell, and it confines them to what you want them to be able to do. Now you'll notice that there's a copy of each one of those shells in bin and user bin. That's because back in the old days, all of this stuff was stuck in the bin or binary directory. Well, they got to thinking, well, it's a user program. It should be in user bin. And they've begun their migration over there. The problem is a lot of applications that haven't been updated still expect the shell they want to use to be in bin. So now they put 2 copies in there, and actually there aren't really 2 copies. There's what they call a soft link from one to the other. Maybe if you went to a user bin and started, say, dash, it actually starts the copy that's in /bin. That's a topic for a later conversation. So what do you use the shell for? There's tons of things you can do with the shell, more than the GUI, actually. System load time, uptime, free disk space, free memory, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll get into some of these commands later on down the road, not today. You can update a system, both local and remote. How can you update a remote system? By logging into it remotely from one computer to another. And we've talked about that in the past, but we can discuss it again later. You can install new programs. You don't have to use the system's GUI software administrator. In some cases, it's quite useful to be able to do this. And you can install new programs on remote computers too. You can check the connectivity to a remote site. You can ping it. You can check the throughput, the speed, check the route, all sorts of interesting stuff. And we would be here till it got dark if I tried to cover all of them. So the first thing on the command line is the prompt. It tells you the computer's ready to accept your typed commands and some other stuff. And you don't have to accept the format of the prompt. It is highly configurable. There is a file, rather cryptic, in a text file, config file, that's rather cryptic, but it, fortunately for Linux, everything is explained on the internet. You can just Google the format. So here's what's on a typical command line. This is mine. What you see here is the user ID. This doesn't have to be your real name. It could be Gonzo or 23 Skidoo or something. It's just what you log in with. The little @ sign indicates you're on this computer. And this is, again, the host computer name, and it can be anything you want. You can configure it in, I think the file is called hostname. It's in /etc. And this is where you're at, the current directory. The little tilde there is shorthand for your home directory. And in the typical bash configuration that most Linux distros have, it will reflect your current directory. Like this one. You can see I'm deep down in sub directories. For the typical Linux distro, which is using the ext4 file format, the maximum path length is 4,096 bytes. And if anybody has a path length longer than that, then I think they have some organization issues. Other file systems have different file path and file name limits. There was a question about how do you change what it looks like. I could have 2 different profiles there under switch profiles. I should do that, one for presentations. But anyway, I just typically edit the current profile. In console, it's under settings. And under Gnome terminal, it's under preferences under edit. But each and every one of them, except for the very, very early basic ones, will allow you to configure the terminal as you wish. If you're, oh, I went through that already. My bad. A demo. Let me see if I can do a demo here. So this is my personal terminal. When I demo KDE Plasma, I will create a new user with the default. For all of the modern Linux distros, when you create a new user, there is a template of files for each desktop environment. And when you create a new user, it gives that new user all of these default template files with the default wallpaper, the default, everything. And you can see mine is definitely not default. But in any case, I'll talk about this. And I may have mentioned this before. With very, very wide screens, your vertical space is more precious than your wide. So I've moved my panel over to the right. And let me widen this. I'll go through that. Here's the settings. I'm going to edit my current profile. Under appearance, I want it bigger. Let's go to, let's say, oops, too far. Well, let's try 24. Yeah, that's fine. There we go. So I'm going to go through some basic commands later, but pwd, print working directory. Yeah, that's where I'm at. And I'll just mention briefly, ls lists all your files. By the way, it's aliased to dir if you remember the old DOS. And in DOS, there was a clear screen command called clear. I got a little more time. Let me, let's see, what should we do? You can cd, ls minus L. Let me make this full screen. There. And you can scroll with your mouse, which is handy. White files are text. And by the way, these colors are an option in Bash. It's not defaulted, but pretty much every distro's Bash configuration follows this. These are directories in blue. This is a video. I don't have any executables in my home directory, which is a good idea. Let's see, I'll go to my docs. Oh, they're under Orv's. By the way, tilde, you can see it's tilde/Orvs. And I've mentioned this a couple times. Orvs is not on this computer. It's on a network attached storage, which is a toaster sized box with a couple hard drives in it. And they're mirrored for redundancy. So we keep all of our documentation, all of our unique files over there. That way, if the computer crashes, they're not lost. And in fact, since there's 2 drives in there that are mirrored, if one fails, it'll run on the other one until I can replace the drive. And if replace it with the vendor's recommended one, it'll automatically remirror back over, which is cool. Let's see, under docs, I have all sorts of stuff. I'm actually in Orv, CD docs. Can't type. By the way, the up arrow will recall your histories. It's very handy. Oh, speaking of history, there is a history command. And it shows all the commands I've done. I think the default is about, I don't know, a couple thousand. And if you want to rerun one of these long commands, you just go, say, for instance, I wanted to rerun this long command. I don't want to retype it. It's command 1990. So you put an exclamation there and go 1990. There I am. What's the root password here? Had too many passwords. Okay, so now I'm logged into a Raspberry Pi that's on a mountaintop about 6 miles east of here. But I digress. Okay. I almost always use ls-l because it gives you a columnar format. I'll go into ls. We can spend 20 minutes just on ls. I'm going to go into ham. Oh, that's another one. You can type a few characters and hit the tab, and it's got tab completion. And you can see our working directory has changed. And suppose I wanted to list everything in this scripts directory. I don't have to change into it. I can say ls-l scripts. And there you are. Oh, look, there's another subdirectory. Recall ls-l scripts. Oops, over here. /mesh. And there happens not to be any there. The cd command, change directory, is the same as in DOS and in the Windows terminal, because a lot of the Windows command window terminal reuses commands from DOS. If you just type cd, it takes you to your home directory. If I want to cd to, and here's another nice one, copy and paste. I can go back there. Oh, that's because I can't use that. See you there. Now, suppose I'm down here in ham docs, and I want to go just up one directory. It turns out the name of the directory above you is ... That's the go up to the next directory command. And there we are. Home. Let's see. What other commands do I not want to yield? Oh, who am I? Okay, duh, no big deal. But if I change to root, of course, you have to type the password correctly. Now, if I do a who am I, I'm root. To get out of that, to get back to yours, you have invoked a new shell running as root, and a shell's a program. To get out of a program, you type exit, and I'm back to me. There's another related command that you probably won't use much, but it's who. Who's logged on? Well, I'm logged on. The PTS 0 and 1 are GUI sessions. The TTY is my original it's a kind of a command line login that the GUI invokes, because the GUI runs on the command line. That's kind of bizarre. I'm covering all the stuff I should have covered before. John, I think I'm going to stop there so I don't ruin my next terminal presentation. Is there any questions? Let me stop the share.
Good one. Yeah, I'm glad. My biggest trouble was remembering whether it's 1 dot or 2 dots when you do a CD. And now I'll have to remember 2 dots to go upstairs.
There you go.
Okay, here's a long thing. If I do create a directory and under it a subdirectory and under that another subdirectory and keep going for maybe 20 subdirectories and then some files in the last one, is there a way to jump to the last subdirectory without keying in the entire path of maybe 50 characters or more of all the subdirectories? Orv showed CD ... to go backwards, but anything to go forward?
There's no, well, let me show you. Where am I? Orv's docs, ham docs, where we were before. I'm just going to list it. Now, if I want to, I'm not there, I just listed it. If you do this and you copy this, and I'm just going to Control C out, I'll CD, paste it. There I am. Oh, by the way, to make a directory, and I'm copying again, what I'm going to have to come up with some new commands for the next time, but that's okay. You make a directory, and I would call it test. Well, if you want to make a directory under test called test1 and a directory under there called test2, that's a lot of typing. But what you can do is, I hardly ever remember to do this.
Oh.
The -P is make the path. Oops. Let's see, what did I do wrong?
Space.
I don't know. There's command line help. Almost every command has a -- help, and you get horribly no error if existing -P. That should have worked. We'll cover that next time, John. How's that?
That's good.
Make a note.
Yep, got the solution that you for the question, and you had already said it before. If you do it once, it's going to be in your history.
Yes.
As long as you don't clear out the history, go back up, memorize what that thing was, and then you just do, the exclamation point and that number, and then it would fill out that long path.
If, like me, you have a bazillion and you're saying, I was SSHing into that terminal, but I don't remember the command, and it's not these two, you could go like this. And again, I'm covering something, jumping forward. So, one of the wonderful capabilities of the Linux command line is the ability to pipe the result of one command into the input of another. So that what I'm showing here is history, and that vertical bar, which on most computer keyboards is above the \, that's called the pipe command. Pipes the output of the command on the left to the input of the command on the right. And grep stands for generalized regular expression. It says look, basically says, look for SSH and only print the lines that have that. And there we go. So then you could either rerun it, or you could say, you could highlight any one of these, or if it was a really complicated command like this, you don't have, you could just run this command or paste it like this, and then put something else here. And if you don't want to do that, just Control C.
And if that was a real long one and he used it a lot, then he could just memorize that command number and then just run it by the exclamation point in that number.
Yep. Or if it was a series of commands I used all the time, I got tired of typing it, I could put it into a bash script, which is just like a DOS batch file, but on steroids. And we'll get into a little bit of that maybe later.
Yeah. And just, you know, to point out too, that in Windows, you would have to go to the file manager and click in that, click in. I don't know of a fast way to get to that last as well as you could with the terminal.
That's probably true. Yeah. Let me see. Oh, hang on a second here. There. How's that? Or I could do, oh, you know, I think I need another one. There we go. Not enough terminals for you?
Yeah.
And by the way, you can go like this. So if I had a process running here, like delete a ton of files here, I could write a program here, or just a simple command to say, show me repeatedly the contents of that directory, and you could see them shrink. Or if it was creating directories, you could see them grow here. So anyway, let's see what happens. If I exit, it'll exit out of all of them, I believe. Let's see. No, oh, cool. Nice. Fun with terminals.
Learn something new every day.
Right.
We do.
You know, and our plan is, my request is that we build up on their learning of terminal commands, from simple commands to use and to what he's going to describe later on in scripts, where you can write a whole bunch of commands, save it, and just run a simple thing, and it runs all the things that you wanted to do it. Lots of things in the command line that I need to learn, and hopefully this will do it. Like today, I finally have it in my head. CD space 2 dots to go upstairs.
But did you write it down?
Now, I can do those things like 2 dots. That'll trigger me. 2 dots, go up 2 steps upstairs, 2 upstairs.
I have a comment. To remember the name of the directory so you can jump back to it, save it in a shell variable.
That's true. We can talk about variables down the line a little bit, I think, John.
Yep, down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, if you want to see your profile, is it profile?
I don't.
No.
And I have another comment when you finish your thingy. Oh, we're talking about cats.
Yeah, this is where you put the variables. It's in a hidden file called profile in your home directory. So I think I've messed with that twice in my life. Oh, I should stop screen sharing if we're done, John.
Okay.
Now that's a real picture, correct?
Yeah, that was actually looking west from Lahaina on Maui a few years ago.
Too cool. If you frequently need to get to a file that is many directories deep, you can create a link to the file at a higher level that is easier to reach. Or, of course, if using the file manager, you can just make it one of your favorite files or directories, so it appears in the navigation sidebar.
That's true. Or you can create a link to it on your desktop, like this text file I use daily, you know.
Mm.
And it's not even on this computer. It's on the file server out in the garage. Well, I call it a garage, but it's air conditioned and has backup power, so it's basically a computer room.
Okay, I thought maybe it was lonely out there in the garage. John, would you close the chat box, please, and open it up for live Q&A?
1 second here. And you know, I want to say thank you for some of those comments, but the goal is that we're going to start slow, because this came from Judy. Begin at the beginning and go slow. So some of these comments are very good that we'd probably cover later. I just don't want to get people who are interested in delving into the command terminal to get too scared off, because all this talk is so much. We're going to baby steps, take it all up through that way.
But when you talk about whatever the comment was, the light bulb will go on and say, aha, they talked about that at another workshop. So they get double reinforcement.
Yeah. So we're going to open up for a little while. And during our Q&A time, if you want to make a comment about the software of the day, or you want to make a comment about the question of the day or any of the projects, or share any kind of exciting news that had taken place this past month since we've been together. This is kind of our open time for all that sort of stuff. And if you have something you'd like to share, it's easiest with all these people that are here and all these screens to hit the reaction button and put the virtual hands up, and you go right to the top of our list, and we know who to call on to share with us. Thanks, Joel.
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment that one of the things that is really cool about Linux and the terminal is that you can use wildcard characters on file names. And one of the things that's very difficult to do in Windows, say you want to modify 50 images in exactly the same way that are in a directory. Well, you have to open each freaking one, do the manual clicks and everything to do what you want to do and save it. There are utilities in Linux that allow you to do all those manipulations on the command line with a file. So if you have a whole directory, you change to that directory, you issue that command with a wildcard character for the file name and all the parameters you need, and it immediately goes through and changes all of those images with one command.
That's true. That reminds me, all of the commands I showed you today, and quite a few more, are built into the shell. They're not external. He was mentioning modifying files. The program's called Convert, does a ton of stuff, and Convert is a part of a package called Image Magic. I don't think most distros have it in the native build, but it's available in every software packet management program.
Mr. Beach, would you tell them where your photo comes from behind you, your virtual background? Where was that picture taken?
Let me see.
And how? Isn't it from your antenna?
This one, I'm thinking. This one was taken on Chatsworth Peak, which is between the San Fernando Valley and, let me think. I have so many cameras up there. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what was Chatsworth Peak. And it was a webcam picture. Boy, I don't recognize that background.
Or he stole it from someplace, one of the other.
No.
I know. But yeah, he has all these nifty pictures that are from one of his, high in the sky antennas.
We have a few minutes, John?
And he will be giving his ham radio presentation in April at one of my workshops.
Let's see, ham radio. Let's see. Let's see if we can make this work.
Ooh. Oh. We're gonna get a live picture.
Hopefully. I typed that right?
I don't know.
But it helps if you ask yourself the question.
Yes, it does.
Ah,
So currently the camera's looking northwest into Simi Valley. This is the 118 freeway going down into Simi. This is a pan tilt zoom camera, and it's set to patrol every 10 minutes or so, and it pivots to other interesting locations. We use this for, just general fun. But when we have a brush fire, we'll zoom in on it and then stream it to YouTube. And then we put that URL out on Twitter or other social medias. It's been handy.
and
Let me
then
see if
you can see launches from Vandenberg too, can't you?
actually we have a camera that's much closer. Let me show you that one. Oh, what is that? Okay, these are static views, but down at the bottom is the one on Gravel Peak, and these towers off in the distance, just on the other side of those hills, are the launch pads, and it's pointing there, and it's not patrolling because, well, now push back to the 17th, they'll launch a SpaceX Falcon 9 with satellites on it, some Starlink satellites, and we've captured videos. Well, here, as long as tell me when I'm out of time.
We'll let you do a little bit more, and then we'll get to Kevin and Rod.
Yeah, because this is fascinating.
And are these running through Raspberry Pi computers on these hilltops?
That was direct from the web interface on the camera. The static ones are copied. Let's see if we can make this play. And should be launching here in just a second. He said, hopefully.
Yeah, well, the timer's moving.
Oh,
There goes one.
Because the reason they launch from Vandenberg is because you can launch in a polar orbit, either north or south, typically south. Because you want to make sure you launch over ocean. So Vandenberg's popular for polar orbits, and you can see it bending south now.
oh, that is too cool.
Yeah.
I'll never see a launch from Florida, but that's close enough for me.
Not to get off topic, but when from time to time they have enough fuel left in the booster to return it back to Vandenberg. I have yet to capture a booster coming back and landing, but I hope to do one soon.
Oh, outstanding. And that is a preview of his April presentation.
Well, okay, yeah, we'll call it that.
Yeah, works for me. And we're over to Kevin.
Just a couple of really short things. After seeing what you guys are doing, I'm almost embarrassed to share. Two things. One, Calvin, Windows 10 and 11, their photo display app does have a graphics editor in it, so you can do a number of graphics changes right there. And then Orv, I really enjoyed your presentation. I really enjoyed hearing all that stuff. I haven't used that kind of stuff, the command line in a long. I don't use it very often. Haven't used it on Linux much, but I'm pretty sure that grep actually stands for generalized regular expression parser. I think the P stands for parser.
You may be right. Nobody ever spells it out or expands it. It's just grep.
It just from a distant cobwebbed part of my brain, I kind of pulled that one.
That makes sense.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Over to Rod.
Thank you. I personally haven't done any command line work for maybe 30 years or so. So do you have a list, or can you provide a list of the basic commands you're using, just like ls space dash L? That means nothing to me anymore.
Here's a tip. If you Linux lives on the internet. In fact, the internet is run by Linux. If you just Google Linux ls examples or Linux ls list, you'll find several dozen web pages that will explain all of those they're options or switches. I forget what they call them, and there are many that I don't remember. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll do that.
Do we have any more questions, comments? Items that you would like the team to research and give a presentation on, or they probably use it anyway, or volunteer to do a little mini thing yourself? Don't everybody raise their hand at the same time now.
Oh, there's a hand raised.
Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when you go on the command line thing, I'm familiar with Unix that I've used before. Isn't there a command that you can put in where it lists all the commands?
There probably is. I've never used it. We'll have to Google that.
Yeah,
but it would be multiple.
It's a one-word thing. When you put it in, then it lists everything you can use, and then you can go to each one and find out what all the alternative ways, and extensions and stuff that you can put in there when you use the command.
I think that could be. If you wanted a list,
it's immediately available to you when you're using the terminal.
Right. But it would. I'm pretty sure it would only list all the commands that are built into Bash, into the shell, and there's a bazillion other programs you can invoke that are not. They're called external programs. They're not part of the shell, and it wouldn't list those.
Okay. Well, then another thing I wanted to ask was, when you use Linux, are you restricted to file names that do not have spaces in them? In other words, you always have to have an underline or a dash or another letter or something like that that connects everything in the file name.
That used to be the case. Now, if you create a file with spaces in it, Linux will put quotes around it, so the spaces are part of the file name.
I see.
And you can access it that way, but you have to start with that quote so it knows what you're talking about, and it works. I'm old school. I don't use spaces in file names.
Me too now.
I know from using the command lines on MS-DOS, and I think in the current Windows stuff, that there's a lot of similar commands and a lot of similar, what do you call those things? Details for each one that you can use.
The switches, yeah.
Is there any thing that you've seen where it shows the similarities and differences between those three types of command line systems?
I'm sure you could go.
They all kind of emanated from the same ideas in the beginning.
They did. DOS got it wrong with the backslash, but I'm sure there's websites out there that will be happy to compare them between the two. And by the way, PowerShell is a fairly recent addition to Windows over and above the command line, and PowerShell is even more Linux-like, more powerful, more of the same behavior. Let's put it that way.
Right. I haven't used that one.
I use it occasionally.
Thanks for running through these things.
Oh, you're welcome. It's fun.
back to Joel.
Comment on the question of how you find out things about commands. There's a manual for many of these commands that's on your computer, and you just type in MAN and the name of the command, and if it has one, it'll show it in the terminal.
That is true. The only knock against the man pages, excuse me, is they're so extensive that they're almost unreadable. It's hard to find what you're looking for.
That's when you
back
go
in the
to
day,
Google on examples.
Yes, that's what you do. Back in the day, there used to be things called NHFs, Nubiized help files, and they would strip it down to the most important stuff, but I think they've fallen out of favor, sadly. But you're correct. There is a man page for all the built-in bash files, and almost all the externals have it. Some of the external programs that you load off the repository, occasionally they'll have might not have a man page if they're not well maintained, because that's loaded along with the main program. And if it's a command line executable, it might not be -- help. It might be -help or -H, but it'll tell you if you mistype it. But yeah, thanks for the mention of the man pages.
Do they have female pages? Just asking. Just
You mean femanual?
Yeah, just asking. I'm intrigued with the Raspberry Pi. I wish that those of you who have done something at your house with a Raspberry Pi would give a presentation on it. Melton talked about setting up his sprinklers and stuff like that. But I would love to see how you use those little darlings in the everyday world. And I see someone who has their phone number instead of their name on their thumbnail. That needs to be changed by right-clicking on the thumbnail and renaming. Minor, you're on.
I'll say that's if she wants any follow-up material.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah, Minor.
Not care. Over to you, Minor.
Good morning, everyone. Good presentation, Orv and Judy. Thanks for doing this. Yeah, comment on the man pages. They were written by the engineer programmer that wrote that script, and that's why they're so dang complicated.
They didn't want to leave anything out. They didn't want to miss anything.
No, that's right. They're everything.
And then it makes total sense to that person and no one else.
I find them hard to use.
But
they are there. They are there, and if you're patient, you can find what you're looking for.
Yeah, I like to DuckDuckGo and ask for a help with a command and examples. Yes. Sometimes I don't know what it means, but I know that that's what works, so I'll use it.
Very good. And Minor, you need to thank John for this. He's the Linux person. I'm the other two Wednesdays.
All right, very good. Thanks, John. Good job.
Thank you. And I can, since she mentioned that, give you a preview already. You already know that next month we're going to have some more Taming the Terminal, and we're going to have the KDE desktop. And I'll let it out of the bag that because next month is National Backup Month, we want to stress that our software of the month will be talking about some backup products for Linux, because everybody always wants to know.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, we do. Oh, yes, of course.
Thank you.
And so if anybody has their favorite backup tool that they use for Linux, and you want to throw your 2 cents in, just let me know and say, hey, I'd like to be a part of that and share this piece of software, and we'll be glad to have you. So I don't know anything about the question of the month yet because nobody sent that in yet, but there's the other part, software backup, because it's backup month, and KDE and more terminal.
And if you are a dual person, you have a Linux computer and a Windows computer, I would love it if we could have some mini presentations on what people are using to back up their Windows computers. Thank you for volunteering. And then I'm also hoping to have John and Don do a groups IO presentation somewhere along the line to show us how they use it, because they kind of both volunteered at that workshop. Joel, you're on again.
One quick comment about Gnome. I think probably it works the same on various distributions, but I had occasion to give a presentation on quick paths on Windows a couple months back, and I was amazed to find that so many of those quick paths worked on Gnome also. So there's been a lot of similarities between the user interfaces that I was not aware existed. If you know a fast path key combination that works on Windows, try it on your Linux system. It may work.
Thank you. John,
That's me.
that
Yes.
would be you.
Hi. I'm holding up a book and
Backwards for us.
yeah, it's backward. The title of this book is The New Corn Shell. Before Bash, the corn shell, KSH, was the most popular shell. There was competition between them. Steve Bourne was too busy to give us what we needed, and so Dave Korn wrote the corn shell and added to the original shell what was needed. Now, I've been using shell since 1975, and even now I go in and check things in this book. I have taught the Unix course in Bell Labs, and the first thing I have to tell people is read one of the manual to find out what commands are available. But now the shell has become so powerful, the bash man page is probably 40 or 50 pages long. It is a programming language.
It is.
But in order to know why you would even try to use the command line, you need to look at something like this. Maybe you can get something like this out of your library or buy a used version, because this is probably out of print.
Oh.
And if you scan through it, you will probably be amazed at what you can do. And to use the terminal, to use the shell, it gives you so much power. If you need to do a large number of things quickly, you want to use the shell and a for loop, the find command. So I recommend that anybody who got the least bit interested should go and check a book. It's a lot easier than having to click and wait for a man page to come up and stuff like that. And this will give you all kinds of ideas about how to do things.
Very good suggestion.
Thank you. George, your turn.
Still no video. So I'll be willing to work with someone else to do a Raspberry Pi presentation. I'm doing one to another group this month. So, but I don't want to take it all on, because you know, there's different levels. There's really beginner's level. There's a you know, and then there's all the different applications you can use that are tailored to the Pi that maybe somebody else. I mean, I think you've got a bunch of Raspberry Pi users in your audience.
Yes.
Yes, it's just to get them to participate.
Well, I guess I could do the outline, and people could fill in their parts.
Okay. We'll be in touch.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now that you've stepped forward, somebody else might say, well, since George, I'll help George. And then somebody else will say, well, I'll help them.
Well, what they'll say is anybody but George, so it'll have to be me.
And I know where George lives, so hey, we're cool, John. What can I tell you?
Okay.
Thank you. I wrote that down in ink.
Yeah, I'm getting really overextended these days, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, you know, it's not going to be soon. Any other questions, comments? We love questions and comments. That's how we learn, by sharing information. Nope.
Good.
Mr. Kennedy, take us away.
Yeah, that's been really great. I've enjoyed what I got to watch, and I hope you enjoyed what I presented. We'll be back next month, as you know, with already what we've said. Watch for the follow-up material. If you left us with your good link to your email in our registration, we'll get all of that. Oh, Judy, another question. I see your hand up.
Yes, indeed you do. Bill reminded me, and that he took on Linux in December, and this month, February, he's taking on a Mac. He has a new Mac computer, and he is using it today, and apparently has had absolutely no problems with using it. And we are eventually going to have Jerry Rogan from Arizona, who will give a presentation about the Mac OS, how to use it. And it will include some of the areas where Bill has gone, what does that do? I natively can't figure it out. So that's going to be something that is totally different, and it will be a good time had by all.
Great. Always looking for topics, always looking for people to help, because as Judy would say, and all the rest of the APCUG board, our group is a group that is helping members help members.